Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Farm and Country Podcast. My name is Adam. Today, we've got a special episode for you. I've got 5 of the best ways to start raising your food that you can start right now this year. It's not too late to get started. First off, let me thank my sponsor for the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Audible. You can get a free ebook. Guys, I love to read. I love stories. I love imagination. I read a lot. And Audible is my choice for reading. I don't have time to sit down and read a book. So I listen to audiobooks, and I can listen to audiobooks whenever I want. When I'm working, when I'm driving, when I'm just sitting around doing nothing, I can listen to an audiobook and be transported into another world. You can get a free audiobook if you sign up today for their trial program at audibletrial.com/FCP. That's the letters FCP. You can get a free audiobook. If you don't like Audible, you can keep the book and cancel your trial and pay nothing. All right, so today, talking about the 5 best ways to start raising your food that you can start right now. It's not too late. So, it's May, and you're thinking, man, I didn't get a garden put in, but, I'd still like to start raising my food. I just don't know how. I mean, this is the problem that I had, is that when I first moved out to the country, I got so excited, I thought I was going to be food independent in like 1 year. But guys, I'll tell you, nothing ever happens overnight. And even moving out to the country, if you have your own land, you have your own property, you're not going to be independent right off the bat. It takes some time to build these things up. Building food independence is something that requires some groundwork, okay? But there are ways to get started that don't take very long and don't cost a lot of money. So I thought I would go over 5 of the best ways to get started raising your own food, where you'll have a harvest at the end of this year, even if you have nothing planted, no buildings, no nothing. Get started right now. So number 1, chickens. Chickens are awesome. You can buy baby chicks and have them mailed to you. This is not something that I ever had considered before. I didn't know that you could get baby chicks in the mail, but they send them. Here in Alberta, we've got a couple of hatcheries, and wherever you are, I'm 100% sure that you'll find a hatchery. Just go on the internet, do a Google search, find hatchery, or chicks, or baby chicks, and you'll find probably 3 or 4 within mailing distance of you who will be willing to mail baby chicks to you. So this is how you do it, guys. I'm not just going to tell you what you should do, I'm going to tell you how to do it. So you're going to need 50. For a family of 4, 50 chicks is a good start. You will have, probably at the end of the year, you might not have 50 chickens because they don't always all survive. In fact, they almost never do. But 50 will give you probably 40. So you'll have 40 chickens, and you can keep growing them, till they reach 5, 6, 7 pounds, guys. Just because a chicken reaches 5 pounds doesn't mean it's done. Big chickens taste good. And if you're spending the money and the time to raise a chick, you might as well raise it to be as big as, well, I guess as you practically can. Now, there is kind of an upper limit. The larger these chickens get, the more likely they are to perish of a heart attack or some other unfortunate and unforeseen circumstances. But 50 chickens will give you a good freezer full of delicious free-range chicken. So what you do is you buy your 50 chickens, have them sent to you, and you set up a small brooder area with a heat lamp. Okay, so obviously it's a little bit more difficult if you are off-grid. You'll have to use some kind of alternative to a heat lamp, and they have these little heating panels that your chicks will just huddle underneath. And they're not lamps, and they don't get very hot, but they're kind of a contact heat source, and you can find those at Premier One Supplies. Any large farm store online is going to stock those. Unfortunately, we don't stock those in our store. I have been hunting for them because they're awesome little things. I'm looking. If I find them, I will stock them because they really are the best way, the best alternative to a heat lamp that there is. Heat lamps, they just burn a lot of energy. 250 watts of power is always going, and that's electricity that I just can't spare. But these little tiny contact panels are about 50 watts, and you can fit a whole bunch of birds underneath them, and they're not going to set anything on fire. So also for raising chickens, you're going to need some starter chick feed. I recommend that you get the non-medicated variety. And you know what? Sometimes it's almost impossible to find non-medicated chick starter. So what you do is you go one up, and you go chick or broiler grower. Yes, you can feed baby chicks the broiler grower. Don't feed them the broiler finisher. Feed them the grower. They'll be just fine. There's enough protein and nutrients in there for a baby chick. I've done it. I've done it a few times because I don't want to feed my animals medicated feed. I just don't want that. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for the animals, and it's just not a good practice to get into. If you're concerned about parasites or you're concerned about diseases, you can put a little bit of essential oil into the water that the chicks are eating. Off the top of my head, I think tea tree oil is a good one, and I think oregano oil was one of the recommended oils to use to prevent disease in your birds. For 50 birds, though, I don't think you're going to have too much of a problem. What you want to avoid is you want to avoid any spots where they can crowd into the corner, and you want to keep an eye on them to make sure that they're neither too hot nor too cold, and that there's no drafts. So that's something you can do right away, guys. It takes about 9 or 10 weeks for a chick to be fully grown. You can take them out of the brooder after about 4 weeks, and you can put them out on the grass. Make sure that they have some kind of protective barrier between them and the environment. Chicken wire on a post will do fine. If you're keeping an eye on your 50 birds, they will be just fine. So the second thing that you can do to have food right now, and I mean right now, guys, like this is something you can do tomorrow. You can go out and get yourself some laying hens. You do not have to raise laying hens from scratch. I mean, you can. You can hatch the eggs yourself. You can raise them. It takes about, 4 or 5 months before a female will start to lay. And they'll steadily keep laying more and more eggs. But you can go out and buy laying hens from dozens of places. Go out, find a neighbor who's got laying hens and say, hey, can I buy 2 or 3 of those off of you? At this time of year, a laying hen is going to give you an average of about, I would say 4 or 5 eggs a week. And that depends on what variety they are. If they're the commercial laying type, they'll give you more eggs, obviously. If they are sort of a heritage breed, they might not give you as many, but they will last longer. The commercial breeds, unfortunately, they don't live very long. They kind of fade out after about 2 or 3 years. And that's just the way it is, guys. Those commercial breeds are they're bred to give lots of eggs, and then they just get rid of them. But a commercial breed like a Buff Orpington or a Rhode Island Red, those chickens will continue to lay for you for years to come. Now, I particularly love the Buff Orpington chicken because it is known to lay year-round. It also develops into a nice big meat chicken. So that is a good breed to start off with. If you're looking for some heritage chickens, get yourself 50 Buff Orpington chickens. Now, what I said about them being ready in 9 or 10 weeks, that doesn't apply to Buff Orpington chickens. It only applies to those regular I think they're called Cornish Rock Giant, Cornish Rock Cross. They're just regular commercial chickens, and they grow really quickly. But if you're getting a heritage breed, it's probably going to take you about 16 weeks before you get a chicken that you can eat. However, the chickens like that, the Buff Orpingtons, will sit on their own eggs and they'll brood their own chicks. So if you're looking to raise a long-term flock, that is a good way to start. Now, what happened with me, I did have Buff Orpington chickens. They got swiped by a coyote, so that's a big problem where I am at. They all died. They got taken. You have to build a protective area for your chickens. They have to have somewhere they can go that is protected. And a small coop that you move around during the day is perfect. As long as it's protected from predators, and as long as you move it to a fresh piece of grass every day, or if it's the wintertime, keep it so it's not buried in snow or something like that, your chicks and your chickens will be just fine. They'll run around underneath there. They'll eat feed that you put in there. For getting egg-laying hens, if you want to have lots of eggs, maybe even some to give away, you're going to need between 5 to 8 hens. It depends on how many eggs you like to eat. I love eating eggs. So we had about 10 hens, and I got these hens at an auction, and I got them for $2 a box. Okay, not each, but a box. And each box had like 3 or 4 hens inside it. It was kind of an odd, strange auction. It was just an anything goes kind of place. A lot of commercial auctions where they auction livestock will have they'll have a 1 day per month where you can just come and auction anything off. People will bring rabbits, they'll bring cats, they'll bring everything, and you could just buy whatever people bring in, except you just don't know what they're going to bring in. So that's a good way to get your hands on some hens. So eggs, that's something you can start. Chickens, you can start right away. Now, number 3 is something that is near and dear to me. I've never done this, but I know a lot about it. And at some point in time, I think I might try it. It's just not going to be this year because it's really busy. But a bottle calf or a bottle lamb, or if you like goats, which, not everybody likes goat meat. I like it. My family doesn't, so that was a non-starter. But get yourself a bottle calf, lamb, or kid. Now what this is, guys, is sometimes mothers, livestock mothers, so the heifer or the ewe or the doe will reject a baby, and it's kind of sad, but it does happen. And instead of letting that baby die, you can actually buy commercial milk replacer, and you can feed this animal yourself. And you can buy this commercial milk replacer from any farm store that's worth its salt, and you just mix it up with some warm water. There's ways to do this. We actually have a little bottle for sale on our store where you can feed the animal, and it's got its own nipple on it. You can replace the nipple. If you're feeding an animal that is smaller, you get a smaller nipple. If you're feeding an animal that's bigger, you get a bigger nipple. And you need to feed the animal 2 or 3 times a day for about, I would say probably for the first 8 weeks. Depending on what kind of animal it is, it needs about 8 weeks of milk feeding. And as you're going through that 8 weeks, you can slowly introduce a little bit of hay, a little bit of concentrate, and some free choice minerals. And you can even let the baby, graze on some grass if there's grass available. And eventually, at the end of that 8 weeks, the animal will just be eating grass and you won't need to feed it milk anymore. You'll spend a little bit of money on milk replacer, and you'll spend quite a bit of time coming and feeding it. I mean, they are basically an infant, and they need to be fed. And unfortunately, there's no real guarantee that if you buy a bottle calf that it'll survive. So it's not a terrible idea sometimes to buy one that's already a couple of weeks old. The real danger period for bottle-fed babies is the first 7 days. If they're going to die, there's an 80% chance they're going to die in that first 7 days. And a lot of times it's because they didn't get enough colostrum, or they have some kind of really just problem with their gut. For cows, there's especially dairy cows, they get this problem with their intestines and they can't absorb any nutrients and they just die. So on the other hand, though, you can get dairy calves for $50 or even $20 in some cases. And so a lot of people will go out and they'll buy like 5 dairy calves and they'll feed all of them, and 3 might survive, and they just take the odds, right? Now, if you're the kind of person that's like, I don't think I can handle if an animal dies on me, well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you're going to have an animal die on you at some point. If you're homesteading and farming, you just have to steel yourself for it. It's never easy to handle that, but it does happen, guys. And you just do your very best to avoid it. If you're feeding a bottle calf, you make sure that you feed them on time and you feed them as much as they'll drink. There's even ways to provide basically a bucket where they'll just drink whatever they'd like, and you can mix the milk with carbolic acid, which keeps it from spoiling. So I'm going to probably put out an ebook on how to do this at some point here, because it's quite a remarkable thing that you can do. You can really create value from very little money by buying a bottle calf or a bottle lamb and feeding it, because you can get these animals so cheap, and especially cows. They are very expensive to buy when they're adults, but they're very inexpensive to buy when they're babies. And if you can get them past that first few weeks, you've got yourself a very valuable animal that will either produce milk for you if you breed it, will produce meat for you if you take it to the butcher, or you can breed it and have more animals. So that is bottled calves and lambs. So now I'm going to talk about some garden produce. Now, obviously, if you're looking to start tomatoes, starting tomatoes at this time of year is a bit tough. You really needed to get tomatoes started in March and April in a little greenhouse or a little grow house or an indoor garden growing area. And I'm going to post some links to something like that on Amazon. There's a little indoor growing area that you can buy, and it's pretty awesome. But for tomatoes, they do take a long time to mature, and you might have missed the boat. However, you haven't missed the boat on certain types of plants that grow really fast, okay? So I'm talking about lettuce. Guys, lettuce can go from seed to salad in 30 days. You can harvest lettuce within 30 days of seeding it. You can grow it in little tiny trays, and you can harvest those little baby lettuce. And then you leave it, and it'll sprout again. The leaves will sprout again. It's a little bit difficult to do that in a garden setting. Usually people, when they harvest in a garden setting, they like to leave the lettuce till it grows into a mature, full-sized plant, and that usually takes about 45 days. Now, the fastest growing plant that grows underground is the radish. The radish is it's a speedy one. 30 days from seeding radishes to eating radishes. Now, on the other hand, maybe you don't like radishes. Maybe you like peas and beans. But peas and beans are pretty fast-growing plants. Peas especially. The first peas that I think I harvested off the plants when we first started growing, I think we got them after about 30 days. Now, it's a pretty small plant. You'll see that the pea plants are pretty short, but they do produce pods pretty much right off the bat. Now, I've got a couple of tips here for growing peas. They like cool and they like moist. And they definitely do not tolerate a lot of direct sun. you'll find your peas get really stilted if you leave them in the direct sunlight. So try not to do that. The same thing with beans. And this is where square foot gardening comes in, guys. Square foot gardening is a technique where you section out your garden into square feet, and you plant something in that square feet, and you use up all of the available space in there. Instead of planting rows like everybody else does, and that wastes all that space, you take your square feet and you plant, peas in this one. You plant maybe 2 corn plants in another one. You plant lettuce in another one. And that way, guys, you're getting diversity, which prevents diseases from spreading. You can companion plant, so you can plant things together that complement each other. And I'm going to talk about that in a second here. I'm going to talk about the 3 sisters. And that'll be number 5. But you also get the benefit of using the available space more efficiently. And if you're watering and you're mulching, you get right in there, and you can water a smaller area and produce more food off of less ground. All right, so what's number 5? The 5th way that you can raise your own food starting right now is something that they call the 3 sisters. And that is corn, beans, and some kind of squash. So it could be pumpkins, it could be spaghetti squash, it could be any kind of squash. But this is how it works, guys. The Native Americans invented this, and they did this like crazy because those guys knew how to grow food. So they would create a mound, and they would mound dirt up into a pile, and in the middle of the pile they would plant corn. I guess they called it maize. But the corn would grow into a stalk. Now around the corn they would plant beans, and the beans, of course, are vining plants. And the beans would climb up the corn stalks as the corn stalks are growing, and it gives the beans something to be supported on, and it also keeps the corn basically safe. It shades the corn from the direct sun. And the thing they planted at the bottom, this is the genius part. They planted the squash at the very bottom because squash grows along the ground. And then the squash would just grow out in a big circle around the corn and the beans. And that's called the 3 sisters. And beans, guys, they're a legume. So the beans, I don't know if you know this, but beans have little tiny nodes on their roots that attract bacteria. And these bacteria turn soil chemicals into ammonia, which is fertilizer. They produce their own nitrogen fertilizer. And of course, corn takes a ton of nitrogen. I mean, anybody who grows corn knows that corn loves nitrogen. It needs lots of nitrogen. Nitrogen being the thing that produces nice green leaves. So planting those beans, guys, produces nitrogen for your corn. Now, that's something to try this summer. I have tried this. I was not successful at it because I couldn't find vining beans. The only beans I could find were bush beans. So I just kind of left it. I did get corn out of it. I didn't get squash, though. In where I'm growing here, if you want to grow good squash, you kind of have to start the plants early, and we didn't do that. So that's something I'm looking forward to doing at some point down the road. The 3 sisters, it's a cool way to grow plants using a very small available space. So that's it for today, guys. This is Monday. We're talking about growing food and how to get a quick start on raising your own food. Have a harvest at the end of the year. Catch us on the web, www.farmandcountrypodcast.com. You can check out our store, farmandcountry.store. We've got all kinds of things available on that store. We've got a special wind-up, solar-powered, plug-in flashlight that also has an AM/FM radio and charges your phone, guys. That's $25. You can get it today. Listeners of the show get a 15% discount. Use coupon code FCP when you're checking out to get that 15% discount. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time, and have a good night.